The sound of soil hitting the coffin was still echoing in his ears when the dogs began to whine, a soft, broken sound that cut deeper than the prayers ever had. Grief was still hanging in the air like cold fog, but cruelty moved faster than mourning, and before the day was over, a single heartless decision would set off a chain of events no one saw coming. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that the smallest acts of compassion can change lives, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this exist because people still care. The mansion had never felt so empty. It was large, polished and intimidating, perched behind tall iron gates that seemed to separate wealth from humanity. Only a few hours earlier, black cars had lined the driveway, and well-dressed mourners had whispered condolences while glancing at their watches. The funeral had been elegant, expensive and emotionally hollow. She had deserved more than that. More than quiet tears from strangers who barely knew her heart. Her name had been spoken kindly, but already it was fading, replaced by business calls and future plans. He stood near the entrance, still in his dark suit, his face stiff and dry, as if tears were beneath him. To the outside world, he was a successful man who had lost his wife too soon. Inside, however, something colder lived, something that had grown over the years as love turned into obligation. The housekeeper, an elderly woman who had served the family for decades, knelt on the stone path near the gate, her hands clasped in desperation. Her grey hair was tucked under a simple scarf, and her knees pressed painfully against the ground. At her side lay the dogs. 3 of them, German shepherds with tired eyes and loyal hearts, huddled together as if they understood loss better than any human there. They had belonged to the woman who was now buried in the ground behind the chapel. She had rescued them, trained them gently, spoken to them like children, and loved them without condition. To her they were family, to him they were reminders. The man didn't hesitate. His shoe nudged one of the dogs, not hard enough to injure, but cruel enough to send a message. The animal flinched, curling closer to the others. The housekeeper sobbed quietly, shaking her head, pleading without words. She knew better than to speak. She had seen this side of him before. The gates were open. The road beyond was long, empty and unforgiving. With a sharp gesture, he ordered the dogs out, his face twisted in irritation rather than grief. In his mind, the house needed to move on, and that meant erasing anything that tied him to the woman he had already begun to forget. The dogs were pushed toward the gate, confused and frightened, their paws sliding on the stone as they resisted leaving the only home they had ever known. What he did not see, or chose not to see, was the man approaching from the far end of the driveway. Dressed in simple clothes, muscular but calm, he moved with a quiet purpose. His eyes were sharp, taking in every detail, the kneeling woman, the frightened dogs, the cruelty unfolding in broad daylight. He had arrived late, delayed by a long drive and memories he hadn't been ready to face. He had known the woman in the grave far better than anyone there. Years ago she had been his sister. The Navy SEAL had buried many friends, many brothers in arms, but this loss was different. She had been the one who wrote him letters during deployments, who sent pictures of the dogs sleeping on her couch, who reminded him that kindness still mattered even in a brutal world. When she died suddenly, he had taken leave without hesitation. He wanted to say goodbye. He wanted to make sure she was honored. Instead, he walked into a scene that made his blood run cold. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. Years of discipline had taught him the power of patience. He watched as the man turned away, already signaling for the gates to close. The dogs whimpered, sensing abandonment, sensing danger. The old housekeeper bowed her head, defeated, her body trembling as if she were the one being cast out. That was when the SEAL stepped forward. His presence was subtle but commanding. He knelt beside the dogs first, letting them smell his hand, his voice low and steady as he comforted them. They recognized something in him, a familiarity carried in his scent, in the calm authority of his movements. One of them licked his hand. The housekeeper looked up, startled, hope flickering in her tired eyes. The man near the gate finally noticed. He scoffed, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption. To him, this was his property, his decision, his right. He had no idea that the quiet stranger kneeling before the dogs had survived battlefields, had led men through chaos, had learned the true meaning of loyalty under fire. The seal stood slowly, his posture relaxed but unyielding. He didn't threaten, he didn't beg. He simply reminded the man, calmly and clearly, that the dogs were not objects, that they were living beings tied to the memory of a woman who had shown more love than anyone else in that house ever had. He spoke of responsibility, of promises made in life that didn't end at death. The man laughed bitterly, dismissing him with a wave. Money had always solved his problems. Why should this be different? What followed was not violence, but something far more powerful, truth. The seal revealed who he was, not with pride, but with quiet certainty. He spoke of his service, of sacrifice, of the sister who had stood by him when the world had nearly broken him. He spoke of the nights she had spent nursing wounded dogs back to health while her own marriage slowly collapsed. Each word landed heavier than the last. The air changed. The housekeeper covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. The dogs sat silently as if listening. And for the first time that day, the man's confidence wavered. He realized he was not facing a random stranger, but a force shaped by loss, loyalty, and unbreakable resolve. The seal made no demands. He simply offered a choice. The dogs would not be abandoned. If they were not welcome in the house, they would leave with him. He would take them, care for them, honor his sister's love. But the world would know what kind of man turned his back on his wife's final legacy. Silence stretched between them. In that moment, the man saw himself reflected not in polished mirrors, but in the eyes of the dogs he had just tried to discard. Something cracked. Not enough to redeem him fully, but enough to stop him. He stepped back, his face pale, and muttered his consent, more out of fear of exposure than compassion. The seal didn't wait for gratitude. He knelt again, securing the dogs gently, thanking the housekeeper with a nod that carried more respect than words ever could. As he led them away from the mansion, he felt the weight of his sister's absence, but also her presence, alive in every step the dogs took beside him. Weeks passed. The dogs adapted quickly to their new life. The seal's home was modest, filled with light and quiet mornings. He trained them with patience, ran with them at dawn, spoke to them the way his sister once had. They healed each other. The housekeeper visited often, her laughter slowly returning, her faith in humanity restored by a man who had chosen kindness over indifference. News spread quietly, not as scandal, but as truth. People spoke of the dogs, of the sister who had loved them, of the brother who had honored her when others failed. The man in the mansion remained where he was, surrounded by wealth and silence, his gate still tall, but his world noticeably smaller. And somewhere, in the simple rhythm of shared walks and peaceful evenings, a promise was kept. If this story is touching your heart right now, please take a moment to comment below and let us know what part moved you the most. Your words matter more than you think. Near the end of his sister's favorite trail, the seal would sometimes stop, looking at the dogs as they played freely, their tails high, their eyes bright. He felt no anger anymore, only clarity. Love, he had learned, was not measured by possessions or appearances, but by what you protect when it's easiest to walk away. If this story reached you, if it stirred something deep inside, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep stories of compassion and courage alive, reminding the world that even in moments of loss, humanity can still rise.